Hello, boys and girls of Credit Union Land, and welcome to episode 63 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Co-op Financial Services. Co-op is your trusted payments processing partner whose mission it is to drive the credit union movement forward. My name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest of the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Joe Hearn. Joe is the president and CEO at Dupaco Credit Union in Iowa. If you've been around credit unions, you probably know Joe. I've always looked forward to bumping into Joe at the conferences, and that's where we actually sat down today, CUES Symposium. Speaking of CUES, Joe is a board member and recently inducted into their Hall of Fame. He's obviously doing something right. This was a fun conversation. We talked about the big project they're working on at the credit union that'll connect them even more to the community and allow them to continue their remarkable growth. We talked about Joe's career in taking the marketing route to the C-suite. Joe opened up to us about the leadership lessons he's learned along the way and his motivation all the way along, let's just say. I truly enjoyed this conversation with Joe and look forward to the next time our paths cross. He was so willing to let us in and to get to know him a little bit better. I think you're really going to enjoy this. As always, we have some fun and wrap it up with the rapid fire questions. So without further ado, I give you my conversation with Joe Hearn. Enjoy. Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
I appreciate you taking the time. We're at a conference, so it's there's always a lot of stuff going on, right? So, but you and I have known each other for quite some time from the conference seed, just kind of in passing, and it's something that I've asked a lot on the podcast is the idea, obviously going to a lot of credit union conferences and things like that, whether it's you're on the CUES board. You just won the CUES Hall of Fame, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I call it the Old Timers Award.
The Old Timers Award.
Yeah.
I think that's what you said when I saw you there. Why is it so important for you to be involved nationally in the the credit union movement? And to kind of follow up on that, how does your credit union back home, I guess, benefit from that involvement that you have?
Well, Randy, it's all about the networking, getting to know great folks like you and some of these credit union leaders. And CUES has provided us the opportunity to network some of the best and brightest credit unions. And you look at the analysis of CUES credit unions, they perform stellar in service to their members, produce amazing results. And boy, if you can't learn something from engaging with those CEOs and those directors of those organizations, you're not paying attention. And that's always been a tradition at Dupaco, go out. And we know each other because we do a lot of networking, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not just about the session, it's the networking outside the session and just the team building and the heart of the credit union people. They're so smart, but they have such a heart for passion, service to their members, and they're fun folks. So you can learn, you can laugh, and it's just really exhilarating.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. And it was one of the reasons, over a year ago now, I wanted to start the podcast is because we're lucky enough to meet all these people, right? And to share the stories like yours with, the broader credit union movement. I was like, this can be a blast, and it has been. So again, I appreciate you taking the time today. One thing, when we talked, it was actually at CUES CEO Network, you had mentioned about the building you bought and the big news that's going on in your community. And doing some research for a conversation today, I read one of the articles in the local paper, actually. Could you tell our listeners about that? It sounds amazing.
Well, we have a historic renovation project going on in the heart of old downtown Dubuque in what was once the largest millworking district in the world. A lot of those they've gone out of business, the Cradco company. Those buildings have been sitting basically vacant for years. And we've leveraged federal, state, historic tax credits, gray fields, new markets, and we're down there renovating that. And that will be the home office location for Dupaco. We'll consolidate a lot of the back shop there. And interestingly enough, it's just a few blocks from where this credit union started, the Dubuque Packing Company. So we're kind of coming back home. We're aligning with community initiatives, historic redevelopment. We're providing the younger employees in our workforce a phenomenal environment, a lot of windows, and an exciting, historically renovated building in a growing, vibrant area of the community. And we're just super excited about it, and the community is responding accordingly. They're just like, good for you, Dupaco. And the best of all, it's the most cost-effective solution, leveraging the tax credits, which is a whole other ballgame there. But they're there, and that's what they're for, and we're bringing them home and putting them to good use here to continue to enhance Dubuque, take care of our members.
It sounded from the article that I read that maybe like a downtown business development, they sounded very excited about this project too, that you're bringing it in. And now, did I also read, is there going to be space in it that you can either rent out or it's going to be used for the community or things like that? Or are you guys going to take up the whole thing now?
Well, it's a 5-story building. Okay. We will occupy 3 floors. We'll group our departments in proximity, those that work closely together, and allow each of those space for growth into the future. We'll have 2 floors we'll lease out. And the second floor, we've got some viable tenants that we're talking to right now. And first floor, hopefully, will be a little more community building space. But we are, again, allows us to grow into it, to leverage tenants and build community, and to contribute to the continued progression of Dubuque. And for those of you out there that have never been to Dubuque, everybody laughs says Iowa. I challenge you to drive by Dubuque. You would be amazed.
What you were talking about with Dubuque, and I've not been, but it reminds me, I lived for 10 years in Greenville, South Carolina. It was also a mill town. And they did this amazing job of revitalizing the downtown after decades of it being a place nobody would go. And it's similar, redoing mills and making them into lofts and office buildings. And now it's the prime real estate,
that's
right?
What's happening.
And that's, so it's beautiful to hear. I absolutely love that. One of the other questions I was excited to ask you is, I tend to like marketers. And I noticed doing some research.
I like marketers too.
Right. Yeah. They're a lot of fun, right? So I noticed that, you came up through your career on the marketing side of the business and now as CEO. It feels to me like over the past few years, we've started to see more marketers becoming CEOs, where it used to maybe be the CFO position that moved its way up. Anything you can add to that, or how that's benefited you as a CEO that had that background?
Well, let's see. I was at Loras in 82 to 86, a small college in Dubuque, and I studied marketing, and the 4 Ps back then, and now it's expanded: product, price, place, promotion. Publicity is another one that you hear. But at Dupaco, I came in as an intern, and the marketing director left, and actually Bob Hafer, my mentor, talked me into taking the job. I was going to go to University of Iowa and continue to get my master's because I was having such a good time going to school. I kind of wanted to keep it going.
Right?
He's like, oh, Joe, just work here for a couple of years. You get your master's. You can always go back and get it. He talked me into the job. I took it. And Dupaco embraced marketing because Bob was out nationally, and he came back and he saw what the best and brightest credit unions are doing. And you know what? Credit unions are the best untold story. And he's like, we need to tell our story. And I'm like, okay, game on. So I was given a lot of latitude, a lot of rope to hang myself, and we did some crazy things and some things we probably shouldn't have done or didn't do it right. But, we learned along the way. And the word got out there, and there's an energy about Dupaco and an excitement because we've always been progressive and aggressive in service to our members, and we've never lost the essence of what made us great in the first place, which is just doing the right thing, lifting people up, and feeling darn good about it.
Oh, I love that. Something you said, just another recent guest on this show, she started as a summer temporary teller and now the CEO, Maria Lavelle. Mm-hmm. So,
well, the backstory is a professor at Loras came up to me and said, Joe, this credit union is looking in for an intern, and I think you should go talk to him. I'm like, what the heck is a credit union? I had no idea. I had to go look it up, and I wasn't even going to do it. But I'm like, you know what? Just for the experience of an interview, I'm going to do it. Yeah. Totally fate. And I'm going to tell you, for a lot of folks out there, it's amazing. And where you end up and how you end up, you just got to be open to opportunities and grab onto them.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I feel so lucky that somehow I stumbled into this industry as well.
Doing a fine job, too.
So a question for you, and this kind of goes back to that national involvement. You kind of, you get to see everything from the blimp level as well, not just from, inside the community. Is there something just across the board in credit unions that you think needs to fundamentally change to keep pace with the pace of change, disruption, all these words that we hear over and over?
Well, we don't ever want to lose that heart component. We want to work smart, and we've got to recognize the way things are going and digital and data, and we have to leverage all that. But we need to always have the heart and the focus on what's best for the member as we go and as we grow. So you need that 1-2 combination. And the more we can instill that in our staff, that we're mission driven and we're going to do smart things, but we are going to take a chance on folks that others may not lend to. And that really energizes a lot of our team, that we're doing things that others don't do And we're doing a lot of the good things that they're doing on the, the larger ones are doing. So they're like, wow, this is a great organization. And we're on the move, and we're creating tremendous opportunities for our members and for our employees to go and grow.
Let me ask you this. You speak to me here. When you're bringing in, and I think this is something maybe some other credit unions, I mean, you're growing. So when you're bringing in new talent, team members, employees to the credit union, how do you instill that sense of purpose that we all love in credit unions for working in the industry? But maybe, like you said, when you were like, okay, I'll take the job, didn't necessarily know what the credit union was, but obviously over time that's built up.
Here's some of the things that we do at Team Dupaco, and we've learned this over the years. Our new hires are sent a welcome packet, and their first day, they have lunch with the senior leadership team, and we go around, we talk a little bit about ourselves. We ask about them, we hear about them, their backstory, their background. They learn a little bit about us. We laugh, we have lunch, and it's just really energizing. And we get such feedback of, wow, I can't believe the senior team would take their first day. And it's like, you are so important to what we're doing. You are valued. You are needed. And when they feel that, they give that to our members. They feel appreciated, and the members feel it from them. And I'm like, we're here to light a fire and help our members and have our employees be engaged, energized, motivated, and provide them opportunities. And it is so cool because it can work out for everybody. It's not about one side winning and one side losing. It's all boats rising, and that's our philosophy. And our team, they deliver. We talk about delivering on the promise of brand Dupaco. They do it, and they get energy from it, and they're ready to do it again. And that's why we're growing, because we're doing the right thing. And one thing I do say is the numbers are people. We look at our numbers, and they're strong. That's because the relationships we have and the passion we have for serving members is strong, and it just really can work out.
I know this is only audio, but it's fun to watch you light up as you were answering that question, so you can see it. And yeah, absolutely. That's
everybody
fantastic.
That knows me know I light up over most anything. I do have a passion for the credit union movement, and it's a blessed place.
I am with you. So break out the crystal ball for me. If we're to sit down a year from now, next year, same event, let's just say, what are you most proud of that you've accomplished at Dupaco in the next 12 months?
We'll be moving into the Voices, this historic renovation here next fall, and hopefully we'll have a smooth and successful transition. We've got some additional branching that we're going to be doing in order to enhance service to our members. We continue to move ahead with technologies. We continue to attract and retain and energize our growing workforce. And we see great results in service to our members. And this past year, we're coming off one of the best years ever. Loans, deposits, our new member growth, we're up 10%, just organic member growth, no mergers. People are coming, they're attracted, they're voting with their feet, and we're there welcoming with open arms. Now, my biggest role as a CEO is let's not get ahead of ourselves and grow so fast that we stop being true to what we are and we lose sight of it. So we have to grow at a manageable pace so we can do the best and be the best, and something we're adamant about at Dupaco.
I think we're going to probably circle back to that, actually, because you just sparked another question in my head, but I want to move on to the leadership and the life hacks portion of the show. What inspired you, I love asking this question, to take the gig as president and CEO of Dupaco?
Well, I was blessed to come in, and marketing was valued, and I was involved in board planning sessions, and I got to know the directors, and I worked closely with Bob Hafer, CEO, and as he talked about transition to retirement, they tapped me on the shoulder and said, would you, and they talked to some other folks at the organization, would you be interested in interviewing for a chief operating officer role? And that basically was to follow Bob, put the training wheels on, and to learn more about the operation. And I was up to that challenge because I had just come off of CUES CEO Institute. And that's something that Bob, he develops his people, and I firmly believe in developing the team members. They always say hire folks that are smarter than you, and I think I've done that at Dupaco, and thankfully so. But I lost my train of thought in the original question.
I think you hit it, though. You keep sparking other questions in my head, though, is obviously like that education and being up for the challenge, like you just said. So did you become the COO before you were the CEO?
Yeah, okay. That's right. So I was given the opportunity, and at the point which Bob was retiring, they had the option to go out and do a search or hire myself, and they tapped me and they said, we think you're up to the challenge. And so the neat thing is just when I took the CEO job, CUES called me, and they had a vacancy on their board, and they said, Joe, would you be? And I'm like, I'm just new to the CEO role. And I went, and they're like, and it was Larry McCann, a good friend of ours. He's retired, but I went to the board and said, well, CUES called, and they're like, Joe, you need to do it. And I'm like, I thought that would be the first thing for their mind is but that's just how much Dupaco believes in contributing, becoming involved. And, the more you give, the more you get.
If you think back, so you knew the CEO was going to be retiring, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening who are maybe, they can see the writing on the wall. Maybe they're in that, they're the COO or CFO and they're looking at that job. In that time when you knew he was going to retire and you thought, maybe I want that job, was there anything that you did, any hacks, or did you just kind of, just jump right into it? Or
I never aspired for anything other than to do the best damn job with what I was assigned to do. And what happened is when you do that, and my other philosophy is make your boss look good. So the better they just kept saying, would you like to do this? Would you like to try this? And yeah, sure. Open yourself. And so I just kind of gravitated towards it. And it was never something I had fully on the radar. But it was just, I grew towards it and into it, and that's a blessing of Bob Hafer, who mentored and coached me. But you got to be open to take on new challenges, to stretch yourself. And then I'm always like, okay, what do you know? Pass it down so they know and grow. And it's like, push it down so you can elevate, and then we all elevate together.
Yep, I tend to agree. So I always like to ask this question one of two ways. Like, how would you describe your leadership style, or maybe how would your team describe your leadership style?
Yeah, I don't know. I would say it's collaborative, because I like a lot of things. Let's talk about it as a senior team, because I want all areas of the operation to be aware of what we're discussing, how it impacts them, to make sure it's going to fit within their workflow, and their teams are aware, and we're not surprising one another. I don't like surprises. So we do a lot of talking at the senior team. So like, yep, when we're all in it. So it's kind of collaborative, and obviously it's in executing the strategies the board sets before us. And because I'm a marketer by trade and communication is key, what I've learned is you have to be very deliberate, very thoughtful about who you communicate with, how you communicate, bringing people along, no surprises, setting the table, laying the groundwork, providing, and especially if you're going into a decision that may be confrontational. I want to tell you, this historic renovation project was not the thing for everybody. In fact, some employers are like, I don't want to have to work downtown. But what happened was we laid out the case and described the decision-making process the board went through, and the people that were resistant said, this was a great Dupaco decision. So you can communication, thoughtful, effective, and showing that you care about them, because a lot of times objections are just cry for more information. And I learned that because I used to sell books door to door. In fact, in college, I was a door-to-book salesman.
Ultimate sales guy, right?
So, yeah, what a great experience that was.
I was going to say, I started my career at Morgan Stanley, actually, and when you make 300 cold calls a day, you learn really quick to deal with rejection. You learn how to read people, and you learn how to communicate. And that's the other thing about leadership these days. It's about communication and bringing people along and trying to understand where they come from, seeing their perspective. And that's the best thing about a marketer as a CEO, because you have to look at the employee side, the financial side, the community visibility side, the board side. You're looking at all sides of these things, and that's just kind of a marketer's thought process by nature, is how it's going to feel and be communicated and roll out and be perceived by the audience. So is there something, I love this question, is there something your team at Dupaco has hered you say so many times they can finish your sentence?
Oh, my God. We're here to make a positive difference in the lives of our members. I say, did we Dupacoize that? And that's like, did we not just do it like everybody else? What did we do to add value or make it different or meaningful or creative? I say attitude and effort all the time. There's so many things that I say, and I'm like a broken record in front of staff, but you know what I do? I also... Generally, when I'm in front of the staff, I tell a member's story, because the stories that are coming back, they'll just light you up. And you talk about engaging our staff. We had the lunch with the new folks, but they go through a process where we bring them back and have a Dupaco experience, where we, after a few weeks in the job or months, they come back and we describe the journey of the credit union. And they see our progression. We tell backstories. We talk about people, and then I come in on lunch and talk about how I got involved and where I'm like, team, we used to have to acquire a lot of this, sum total of this organizational knowledge over the years, just kind of through interactions. We want to give it to you so you see where we've come from and why we are where we are and why we think the way we do, so they can see the future, and you energize them. And then we talk about connection and relationship. And then we bring them back a third time for what we call making connections. And at that session, we have them tell their stories of connections they've made with members and how they felt. And there are tears. We're laughing. It is just the most engaging, and you're touching the hearts. And if that's what it's about, that is going to insulate us against all the technology. If we can have the tech, which we can be a fast follower, but if you got the heart and the smart, it can do profound things. And that's where we're at, is we're never going to lose that.
I have to imagine for new employees to feel that in that whole onboarding process, that it makes it start to seem more than a job, right?
Well, they're all like, well, I've worked other places. And they're like, is this good? The best thing is they're like, the first day, they're like, wow, this is so cool. And then invariably they'll come back and say, I wondered when the music was going to stop. And they're like, it'd be a year or 2 or 3 later. And they're like, and it never did. And that's what I love to hear, because they're continue to be energized and motivated. And we talked about motivation in one of the sessions here this week. They're motivated to do what they know is right, and it just really, it's working.
That is great. When you think back to earlier in your career, is there a mistake that you made, or one that you see young leaders make often?
I've made too many mistakes, and I usually talk too fast. But you asked about our team meetings, and I'm trying to sit back and listen more, and direct and talk less. And I challenge my leaders to not give your team solutions. Have them, they need to come and here's the issue, and they need to have thought through their proposed answer. It's like not telling them what to do, asking them, well, how are you going to do it? How should we do it? And getting, so they know that they have to think it through. It's not just about, so it's putting it back on the people, because that's for their professional growth and development. And then you obviously at a high level, you make sure that they're doing it in the Dupaco fashion, that they have indeed recognized all the factors that need to be recognized, and it's the right decision.
I think I was at a CUES conference a few years back, and one of the keynotes said, one of the greatest questions, like when an employee comes to you, is to say, what would you do?
Yes.
And I remember him talking about, it might not be the exact way you would do it, but say, okay. And I remember going home from that CUES event, and I started using that with my team constantly, and it was amazing how much more ownership people took in things.
And my team, when the team comes to me now, and they know this, they're like, boy, what questions is Joe going to ask? And they're like, oh, he's going to ask this, he's going to ask that, what's this? And they come, and then they're always like, we're always trying to figure out what question are you going to ask that we're not thinking of. And I'm like, that's exactly what you need to be. You need to be putting yourself in the other person's shoes and thinking it through and saying, what do they need to know? And it's beautiful when you see that, and they love it. It's because it's a challenge too.
Absolutely. I remember when Tom Kane was on the podcast, he said, that his team knows that if they come to him with a problem, they better have at least one solution, right?
Absolutely.
So that they're already thinking on it. Has there been a piece of advice or a life lesson that you find yourself going back to that you just kept with you throughout your career?
Oh man, I'm telling you, a lot of life lessons. Just do the right thing. And, when there's an issue with a member, I'm like, explain what's going on. Put yourself in the shoes of the members and just try to recognize, see all sides of it, and then say, what, based on this, and maybe they're at fault, maybe we're at fault. It's like, what is the right and fair solution? Where's the point? Do we go to the member side? Do we stick our heels in the ground? Or is there some compromise in the middle where you can end where they feel they've got it and we've worked with them? It's just about doing what's right and fair. And that's just such a gray area, and it's not easy. But, our business is not black and white. I mean, you have regulatory lines, but there's a lot of gray in there. And we always tip it back and say, ask the member, what do you think's a fair resolution? And try to have them, tell us and try to work with them, because invariably you can turn the worst situation, depending on how you handle it, they can become your biggest advocates. And they go out and say, you know what, that Dupaco, they listened, and that's profound.
So one of the things I noticed in the first season of the podcast was many of the CEOs on the show had a mentor that they kind of just went back to in their mind when they were thinking about a lot of the questions. You've mentioned, the previous CEO. Yeah. Did you have a mentor kind of throughout your career?
Well, my folks have been my mentors. My dad's a small businessman. Love the guy. Miss him. My mom, they're just good, salt of the earth people, good for the community, take care of people, do the right thing, think beyond yourself. And then I came to Dupaco, and Bob Hafer hired me, and he's the same way. And so that guy, he put me through the paces, and we had our disagreements, but that's the beauty of it is, sometimes you can learn from others, and you got to be willing to put yourself out there and see compromise and so my folks, Bob Hafer, and obviously, we all talk about coaches that kicked our butt and humbled us. And so I've got a lot of mentors. And, I got to say, a lot of the folks I work with are mentors to me because, boy, when you listen to them, boy, I learned something there. And that's why I like boards, and they're all on boards. And I'm like, go listen how other people see problems, what they think, because you don't think you're going to know more by hearing from others, and then it'll help you make a more informed decision. And so I'm being mentored every day, and even the new employees that we bring are I listen to their stories, where they come from, why they came to Dupaco, what they see in us, and what they hope for. And I'm like, boy, if we can deliver on that and give them that, it can work out. I just like things that work out for everybody. And yeah, it's not always the case, but more often than not, if the employees know that's what we're striving for, they can bring it home in that fashion, and it keeps working.
It didn't surprise me for you to bring up your dad and your mom, because when you said do the right thing, I'm like, I bet that came from childhood. That was what was ringing in my head, actually. So that's beautiful. This is a question that I've added in the second season, but was there ever a point in your career, like while you were on the way up, before you got to the C-suite or before you were the CEO, that you just kind of had some self-doubt? You were like, am I doing the right thing here?
Well, as a CEO, I have self-doubt every day, but that gives you, seriously, but you've got to be humble, and you can't think, okay, I'm the CEO, now I know everything. It's probably, you have to be more guarded and say, I probably know less than I need to, because these are big decisions. These are big things going on, and it's profound for the future. So you can't think you know more. You have to be open to more, and you have to listen more, and you have to try to see what's best for all and compromise and bring folks into the middle or whatever in it. So you have to be humble, I think, and you have to walk the talk. You can't say one thing about you're going to do this for the members, and then if we don't exemplify that, and so you got to walk the talk, because that's when people look at the leaders and they roll their eyes if and I intentionally park the furthest from the door, and I'm right now in our temporary space. I'm working in a small inboard cube, and I'm do things so employees look and say, that guy's he's in it with me. And you meet them in the coffee and break room and ask about their kids and just care about them as a person. Those people put themselves out there for you, and it's a great thing. It's a great thing.
So you just mentioned working in the temporary space, working in the cube right now. What does the typical day look like for you, and what's the perfect day if you could design it at work?
The typical days, you get up, and one thing I do religiously during the week is I'll get up early and I'll work out a little bit, and then I get into the office and get my cup of coffee, and then get my second cup of coffee, and there's the engagement, because you're walking them down the hall talking to folks. You get back, you get on your emails, and then the meeting progression usually starts. And, the perfect day is when I can see the things that we're working on continue to move ahead. I can give clarity to a senior team members like, I don't know, I'm kind of stuck here, or we can work through things. And when I hear stories of member engagement connections, when I see staff that are like feeling good about themselves, you can walk into a lot of businesses, you can feel an energy and a vibe. And when the vibe is good and people are like, we're making a difference, that makes my day. That makes my day.
So inside or outside of credit unions, is there a memory that comes to mind where you're just like, yep, nailed it. Just puts a smile on your face. I killed it.
I don't know. It's I do a lot of emailing back to employees for, a frontline employee I heard did a good job, or I'll call them or run into them, or if a member complains, I'll talk to them, or if a member sends a compliment and I hear about it, I'll call the member. And we had a member that we lent to, and she sent a notice, and I called her, and I later on I heard she couldn't believe the president of the credit union called, and she was crying, telling our staff member. I'm like, just give people respect and dignity and show them that they're of value, and it'll come back to the organization, come back to you. And I just get a great feeling about lifting people, having them feel better about themselves or their day. And that's what I preach to the employees. I don't care if you cross-sell to the nth degree. What I care about is you connect with that member. When they feel that you care about them, that'll give us the opportunity to slow it down and say, you know what, let's sit down. We can talk about your situation. And because people are moving fast, you can just get them to connect, slow down, show that you care. That's where the magic can happen. And we call these money makers. We sit down and do their whole finances and refinance and save them all kinds of money. But you just can't say, do a makeover. But once you know them and trust you and you know about their kids, and you can say, hey, they trust you. They'll sit down, give you the time. And that's where the real magic happens. But the small things lead to the big opportunities.
Before we move on to the last part of the show, I'd like to ask, if you have a free day, there's nothing on the schedule at all.
Yeah.
What does Joe do to recharge outside of work? I know it doesn't happen often.
Yeah, I'd like to sleep in on Saturdays if I can, unless the kids have something going. I like to get the Wall Street Journal. I mean, they keep coming at you, and there's so much in there. So I spend a lot of time in the Journal and scanning the papers and news wires, just kind of take in what's going on. But I like to sit by the fire and drink a latte and read those papers and see the kids come down, give them a hard time. And that's a good day. And I think another good day, just when I'm off the clock, is Sunday. We get up and go to church and take the kids out to breakfast at the Village Inn, and they hate it because we do it religiously, but it's quality family time. No phones. We're there. We're waited on. We're not yelling at some kid to do the dishes. It's like we're just sitting there as a family, and it's really neat. And I know someday they complain about it. Now the kids are going to look back and say, those are great times, because I had the same great times with my folks. We'd go to church, walk across the street, and we'd have quality family time without distractions. So those are good days for me.
I'm sure they will remember it as that too as they get older. Right? Life starts to get even busier. So last part of the show, the rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid. Your answers don't have to be. We get to have a little fun here. So
what was Joe like? Never rapid.
That's all right. I love it. It'd be a short, boring podcast if they were. So what were you like in high school? And do you remember the first time you got in memorable trouble?
Oh, geez. It was a freshman, and I used to have a switchblade comb, and the seniors come up to me and give me a hard time. So I whipped out the switchblade comb and clicked it open, and they thought it was a switchblade knife, and it was a switchblade comb. And they kind of ran away. They thought it was a knife. Later on, when they found out it was a comb, they came and picked me up, took me to the bathroom, stuck my head in the toilet, and gave me a swirly. I don't know if you ever heard of that. But so, that was humbling.
That's fantastic.
I had it coming.
Yeah, that's so great. That's one of my, that's up there on the best stories so far. So most of us stumbled into a career into credit unions. Kind of mentioned that, while you were in school earlier. Young Joe, what do you want to be when you grew up?
I don't know. My dad was in business and respected in the community, so I think I always knew business. And my mom said when I was a little kid, I used to stand in front of the TV and say, Poetex Wiving Bois. Like I'd watch commercials, and so I think this is the marketing. And I always like creative, and I like doubleisms where you say one thing can mean several things, and it's like people have that aha moment. So it's just, always I like marketing, but communication, and I like unifying people.
I thought you were going to say play for the Cubs. I always see you with the Cubs hat on. So
that's the other thing that the staff will all say is I'm always ranting about the Cubs. The Cubs are going to get them this year, and I've said it every year. And you know what? 2016, we got it done.
You actually did. Yep, I was actually there for one of the games. So I had a friend in Chicago. I was like, I've got tickets. I was like, of course, I'll be there.
Yeah.
So.
You see me sitting around these conferences. I got my Cubs shirt on. My wife's like, gee, style it down. They all know you're a Cub fan. I'm like, hey, we got to stick together.
I was just talking today out in the hallway to a guy from Detroit where I grew up, and the only hat I own is a Detroit Tigers hat. I won't wear any other hat, period. I've had many over my life of just new Tiger hats.
I got to appreciate loyalty.
Yeah, right. That's absolutely it. You mentioned working out earlier. Do you have any daily routines that if you don't do, your day just feels off?
Yeah, and weekdays, if I don't get that morning workout, and I'm fortunate enough to live on a golf course where I'm off the first tee, so in the summer when the days are longer, I'll roll out of bed and I'll go walk 9 holes of golf, and I'm going to tell you, the sun's coming up and the birds are chirping, and I'm not the greatest golfer, but it's just like a neat time way to set the day. And I go to the office after walking that 9 holes, carrying my clubs, sit down at the desk, and you're relaxed. Yeah. And then away it goes. And then there goes the tension. But, that's energy for the day.
You have to get the blood moving. Yep. The random question, what's the best album of all time? The one you can...
I'm not a big music guy. I really am not.
No?
But I like U2. I mean,
There wasn't one from high school or
No, I never really... Although one time I remember walking to Gimbel's on Independence Main Street when I was a little kid and buying Kung Fu Fighting, a little record. That's probably the only record I ever bought. I don't know. I must have really liked that. I'm not into Kung Fu right now, so I don't. It didn't stick
with you. That's great. I'm a reader. Jill and I have a stack of books in our house. That stack keeps growing because of the podcast and recommendations. Is there a book that either you've gifted to others or you just think everybody should read?
I'm not a huge reader. I mean, it's Wall Street Journal, and I'll come to these conferences and we'll get these authors, and I'll take the books, read them on a plane. But it's Wall Street Journal, it's news feeds, it's just that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time, and on that phone, just scanning the news feeds, and and I do like the Wall Street Journal because it's business, it's finance, but then they have the personal and the trends, and it's just but they come at you every day, so you got to keep up on it, and so that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time when I'm off the clock.
Gotta ask, is it the digital subscription at this point, or you still get the paper?
Well, I've got the paper, and I'm old school, but I also have the digital, so I can look at it online. But I like to sit there with my feet up in the paper, and I think then the kids know, well, leave him alone. He's reading.
As you've gotten older, what's become more important to you? And my favorite part of this question, what's become less important?
Everything to me is important. More important is how other people feel, how you treat people, and like I said, the more you give, the more you get. So it's just important, and actually, it's very important to me that when I hear of a negative member circumstance, it's important to me that we try to understand what happened, why, and can we learn from it, what can we improve on? Because, the more the little things you can address them, and what's happening is over the years, I'm getting more and more and more and more and more positive member feedback, and it's so outweighing the negative. I mean, we don't do everything right, and that's the other thing I say to the staff. We are not perfect, but we're trying. And so it's heartening when you get that much positive member feedback, and again, learn from the negative things, because there's usually a backstory in there.
So there's a question I don't send.
Yeah.
When you hear the word success, who's the first person that comes to mind?
Ooh, success. Who's the first person? Well, my dad.
Yeah. How
my
come?
Mom.
Tell me why.
Respected, caring, hardworking, just he's really loved by the people, and I never forget when he passed away. There's the editorial in the paper the guy wrote about. I remember my dad and how he was, and when the Cubs made the playoffs for the first time, everybody knew we're having a party at my house. He had that. He told people that for years, and by God, they had the party the day when the Cubs made the playoffs in the 80s for the first time in who knows how long, and people have been, it's just like, he had this aura about him, and people like to be around him, and it's about making people feel special.
That is the reason I love that question so much, is because we all define success differently. And in the first season of the podcast, Mom was number one answer. People, and so it's always great to hear Dad get the shout out. My wife,
I got to give her a lot of credit too. She's a success in keeping me in line there. 'Cause, I can be a handful sometimes, so I love her to death. And the kids, I'm so proud of them. They're doing it right, and they treat people right, and success is being genuine, authentic, true. And, Jim Valvano said, a good day lived is you think, you laugh, and you be moved to tears. And, I tell that to the staff too. And when we're telling member stories and I can see people tearing up, I'm like, that's the real deal.
That is a good day. Joe, thank you again so much for taking time to be on your show. I think that's a fantastic point to wrap up on. The last question I have for you, do you have any final asks of our listeners? Any final thoughts you'd like to share with people today?
Pay it forward. And because I'm a CUES board member, take a hard look at the CUES conferences, and they just provide such wonderful education, networking, and they're there for you. So we can help you develop your teams. So pay it forward, mentor somebody, and the more you give, the more you get.
That is fantastic. We'll link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. If they have additional questions of you on the Twitter machine, LinkedIn, email, what's your poison?
Email jehearn@dupaco.com. That's DUPACO, and that's probably the best way.
Thank you again, Joe. I hope you have a fantastic day.
You do, Randy. Thanks for making a difference for the movement. And you listeners, thanks for what you're doing to make a positive difference in the lives of the members we serve.
Before we go, I would like to take the time to say thank you for listening. Thank you to all of our listeners. We so greatly appreciate you. And once again, thank you, Joe, for taking the time out of his busy schedule to sit down with us and have this conversation today. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Co-op Financial Services. Make sure to click on their link in the show notes and see everything cool they have going on. Also, we are on all the podcast players out there: Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. We would greatly appreciate if you subscribe, leave us a 5-star ranking. maybe even a review on the old Apple Podcast machine. It helps with the visibility of the show on that platform. If you don't think we're worth the 5 stars, forget I asked and just reach out to me directly and let me know what we can do better. We will do our best to improve. And don't forget about the CUInsight Experience podcast book list. Get your next reading recommendation from the guests on our show. Thank you all again for listening, and have an amazing day.